Some truths are so devastating, they divide your life into before and after. Before you heard. After you knew. For Adriana Moretti, that moment came in a marble hallway, dressed in white lace and dreams, 30 seconds before she was supposed to marry the most dangerous man in Chicago. She heard 7 words through a crack in a door, 7 words that shattered every illusion she'd carefully constructed about her future. I don't want her. I never did. This is the story of a woman who discovered the cruelest truth on what should have been the happiest day of her life. A woman who had to choose between her dignity and her survival. Between running from the truth and walking straight into it with her head held high. Her name was Adriana Moretti, daughter of Chicago's most powerful crime family, and she was about to become Mrs. Luca Desai, wife to a man who saw her as nothing more than a signing bonus. Stay with me until the very end of this story. Hit that like button right now, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Adriana's truth travels. Because her story, it's one that will stay with you long after this video ends. The August heat in Chicago was merciless that day. The kind of heat that made marble floors feel like ice under your feet while silk burned against your skin. Adriana Moretti stood alone in the cathedral corridor, her trembling fingers clutching a cascading bouquet of white roses so tightly that thorns pressed through the ribbon wrapping, drawing tiny pinpricks of blood she didn't even feel. Her wedding dress, all Italian lace and seed pearls, chosen by her mother during a trip to Milan she barely remembered, felt like the most beautiful cage ever designed. Every inch of it was perfect. Every inch of it was a lie. Beyond the heavy oak doors, 300 guests waited. The cream of Chicago's underworld elite, men in expensive suits who'd killed with those same hands they'd used to applaud when she appeared. Women dripping in diamonds paid for with blood money, whispering behind their champagne glasses about alliances and territories, and the Moretti girl finally doing her duty. Adriana had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Not for love, that was a luxury girls like her couldn't afford. Not for happiness, that was for civilians, for people whose last names didn't open doors and seal fates. No, she'd been preparing to be exactly what her family needed her to be, a bridge between empires, a bargaining chip with a pretty face, a womb for the next generation of power. The Moretti name carried weight in certain circles. The kind of weight that came with blood and secrets, with bodies and foundations and favors that could never be repaid. Her father, Salvatore Moretti, had built an empire on the bones of his enemies, and now he was cementing his legacy the old-fashioned way, through his daughter's marriage to Luca Desai, the man they called the Serpent of the South Side. She'd met Luca exactly 4 times before today. 4 carefully orchestrated dinners where they'd made polite conversation over courses that cost more than most people's monthly rent, while their fathers discussed territories and percentages and who controlled what ports. 4 times when she'd studied him like a text she needed to memorize, trying to find something, anything, to hold on to. He was 32, devastatingly handsome in that dangerous way that made women stupid and men careful. Dark hair that fell just slightly over his forehead, darker eyes that seemed to see through everything and reveal nothing. A jaw that could have been carved from the same marble that lined these cathedral halls. He moved like violence contained in a perfectly tailored suit, spoke in measured tones that made every word sound like a decision, and gave away absolutely nothing of himself. Adriana didn't love him. How could she? You can't love a stranger. You can't love a man who looks at you the way an art collector looks at a painting he didn't choose but can acknowledge is beautiful, with distant appreciation and zero emotional investment. But she'd convinced herself of other things. Dangerous things. Hopeful things. She'd told herself that respect could grow into something more. That duty could become devotion. That maybe, just maybe, a man who'd been raised in the same world she had, who understood the rules and the roles, might eventually see her as more than just an acquisition. That patience and loyalty and being the perfect wife might earn her, not love, perhaps, but something close to it. Companionship. Partnership. A shared life that meant more than just contracts and territories. She'd been such a fool. The cathedral doors were still closed. Her father had stepped away to handle some last-minute detail, probably counting the money Luca's family had transferred, making sure every zero was in place before he handed over his daughter like merchandise. It left Adriana alone with her thoughts, with the oppressive weight of her future pressing down on her shoulders like a physical thing. She pressed one hand against the cool marble wall, trying to steady her breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. The way her mother had taught her. Never let them see you sweat. Never let them see you cry. Never let them know that inside you're screaming. That's when she heard them. Male voices, low and urgent, coming from the room adjacent to the corridor. The door was ajar, just a sliver of space, maybe an inch, maybe less, but sound traveled easily in these old stone halls. Sound had a way of carrying secrets whether you wanted to hear them or not. Everything's in place. That was Luca's voice. She'd recognize it anywhere. Smooth as expensive whiskey with an edge that suggested violence was always an option, always just beneath the surface. Yes, boss. The response came quickly, deferential. The Morettas signed everything this morning. The docks, the shipping routes, the laundering operations in Milwaukee. It's all yours the moment you say, I do. The second voice belonged to Marco Vitali, Luca's right-hand man. Adriana had met him once at the final dinner, noted the cold intelligence in his eyes, the way he moved like a weapon waiting to be deployed. A man who'd never questioned an order in his life. Good. A pause. The sound of ice clinking against crystal. Pour me another. I need it. Wetting nerves? Marco's tone held a hint of amusement, the kind that made Adriana's skin crawl even before she knew why. And then came the words that stopped her heart. The words that divided her life into before and after. The words that showed her exactly what her future looked like. Don't be ridiculous. I don't want her. I never did. The marble hallway tilted. Or maybe it was the world. Maybe it was everything she'd ever believed about her life, her purpose, her carefully constructed reality. Adriana pressed both hands against the wall now, her bouquet dropping to the floor with a whisper of crushed petals against stone. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't do anything but stand there while those 7 words played on an endless loop in her mind. I don't want her. I never did. Then why go through with it? Marco asked. And God help her, Adriana found herself leaning closer to the gap in the door, desperate for the answer even as part of her screamed to walk away, to run, to do anything but listen to more truths that would destroy her. Because it's business. Luca's voice was flat. Matter of fact. The same tone he might use to discuss the weather or a stock portfolio. The Moretti girl is pretty enough, well-trained, from good stock. She'll give me legitimate heirs and keep her mouth shut about family business. That's all I need from a wife. Some men might want more, Marco ventured. Some men are fools. The sound of glass meeting wood. A tumbler set down with finality. Love makes you weak, Marco. It gives your enemies leverage. I watched my father destroy himself over my mother. Saw how loving her made him vulnerable, made him make stupid decisions, put her safety above the family business. How her death nearly brought down everything he'd built. I won't make that mistake. So the Moretti girl is just a strategic acquisition. Nothing more. Exactly. I'll treat her well enough, give her a comfortable life, a nice house, jewels, whatever women want. But she needs to understand from the beginning that this is a transaction. I'm buying the Moretti territories and alliances. She's part of the package, like a signing bonus. Marco chuckled, low and ugly. Does she know? She's not stupid. She knows how these things work. Her father sold her like livestock. She'll do her duty, I'll do mine, and we'll both benefit from the arrangement. That's all there is to it. And if she wants more? If she expects? She'll learn to expect nothing. Luca's voice turned hard as steel. Cold as the marble under Adriana's hands. I've made no promises of affection, Marco. This marriage is business. Period. The sooner everyone accepts that, the smoother things will go. I won't be cruel, there's no profit in cruelty. But I won't pretend to feel what I don't. She's a means to an end. A very pretty, very useful means to an end, but that's all she'll ever be. Footsteps approached the door. Adriana jerked back, her heart hammering so hard she was certain they could hear it in the next room. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the train of her dress, pressing herself against the far wall as if she could disappear into the stone. The door opened fully. Marco stepped out first, adjusting his cufflinks, and then Luca followed. And that's when their eyes met. For just a moment, one infinite, eternal moment, Adriana saw something flicker across Luca's face. Surprise, maybe. Or was it guilt? But it vanished so quickly she might have imagined it, replaced by that same cool, distant expression she'd seen at every dinner. He looked at her standing there, her face pale, her hands shaking, her bouquet on the floor, and she knew. She knew that he knew she'd heard. Every word. Every cruel, calculated word. And he said nothing. He simply straightened his tie, gave her a slight nod as if they'd passed each other in a hotel lobby, and walked away toward the main doors of the cathedral. Marco followed, but not before giving Adriana a look that made her blood run cold. A look that said, "You know the rules. You know what happens to people who don't play their parts." She was alone again in the hallway. Her father appeared moments later, smiling, oblivious. "Tesoro, it's time. You ready?" Adriana looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who'd raised her, who'd taught her to read and to shoot a gun, who'd tucked her in at night and killed men in the morning. This man who'd sold her to a stranger for territory and power. She could say no. She could tell him what she'd heard. She could walk out those doors and never look back. But where would she go? To what life? With what money, what protection, what future? Girls like her didn't get to run. The world outside these marble halls was just as dangerous, just as unforgiving, and she'd have nothing, no name, no family, no shield against the darkness. And more than that, something hard and bright and burning had ignited in her chest. Pride. Fury. A determination that shocked her with its intensity. He doesn't want me. He thinks I'm just a signing bonus. He believes I'll learn to expect nothing. We'll see about that. Adriana bent down and picked up her bouquet. She smoothed her dress. She lifted her chin. And when she spoke, her voice was steady as stone. "I'm ready, Papa." End of Part 1, cliffhanger. What happens next will shock you. Comment below, would you have walked down that aisle? Part 2 is coming, and trust me, Adriana Moretti is about to show Luca Desai exactly what he's underestimated. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. If you're just joining us, let me bring you up to speed on the most devastating wedding day in Chicago history. Adriana Moretti, standing in her wedding dress, heard her soon-to-be husband tell his right-hand man that he didn't want her, never did. That she was nothing more than a business transaction, a signing bonus, a womb for heirs. She heard him say she'd learned to expect nothing. And then she did something that would change both their lives forever. She walked down that aisle anyway. Not because she was weak. Not because she was broken. But because in that moment, standing in that marble hallway with her world in pieces around her, Adriana Moretti decided something that would define the rest of this story. If Luca Desai wanted a business transaction, she'd give him one. But on her terms. Drop a like if you're ready for the most intense wedding ceremony you've ever heard. And comment, Team Adriana if you're rooting for her. The ceremony. The organ began. Those first triumphant notes that were supposed to signal joy and new beginnings. Adriana watched the heavy oak doors swing open, revealing the 300 people who'd come to witness her sacrifice disguised as a celebration. Her father took her arm. "You're trembling, Tesoro." "It's just nerves," she lied. But it wasn't nerves. It was rage. It was determination. It was the feeling of every illusion she'd ever had about this day burning away, leaving behind something harder and infinitely more dangerous than the naive girl who'd stood in this hallway 20 minutes ago. They started walking. Every eye in that cathedral turned to look at her. She could feel their gazes like physical things, assessing, judging, calculating what this union meant for their own positions in the intricate web of power and violence that governed their world. But Adriana only looked at one person. Luca stood at the altar in a midnight blue suit that probably cost more than a car, his dark hair perfect, his expression unreadable. He watched her approach the way a businessman watches a merger finalize, with interest, but no emotion. With satisfaction at getting what he wanted, but no joy in the getting. And that's when Adriana made her decision. She would marry him. She would become Mrs. Luca Desai. But she would not, be the docile, invisible wife he expected. If this was business, if she was just an acquisition, then fine. She'd be the most unforgettable acquisition he'd ever made. She'd haunt him with her presence. Challenge him at every turn. Make him regret every word he'd said in that room. She'd make him see her. Really see her. And if she couldn't make him love her, she'd make damn sure he could never forget her. Her father placed her hand in Luca's. The priest began the ceremony in Latin, ancient words about love and devotion and, "till death do us part." Words that meant nothing in this context. Words that were as much theater as the flowers, the candles, the stained glass windows filtering colored light across the gathered criminals pretending to be respectable. But when it came time for the vows, when Luca turned to face her fully, Adriana did something that made several people in the front row gasp. She looked him dead in the eye and smiled. Not the trembling, grateful smile of a bride. Not the demure, submissive smile of a woman who knew her place. No. She smiled like a woman who knew a secret. Like a woman who held all the cards. Like a woman who just decided to play a game Luca didn't even know had started. For the first time, she saw something flicker in those dark eyes. Confusion, maybe. Or the first hint of uncertainty. Good, she thought. Let him wonder. Let him question. Let him realize that he's not the only one who can play games. Adriana Francesca Moretti, she said, her voice ringing clear and strong through the cathedral, take you, Luca Antonio Desai, to be my lawfully wedded husband. She said the words. But she was making entirely different promises in her mind. I promise to be unforgettable. I promise to challenge every assumption you've made about me. I promise that you will regret underestimating me. I promise that by the time this is over, you'll wish you'd wanted me. When it was Luca's turn, he said the words with the same flat, business-like tone she'd heard through that door. No emotion. No warmth. Just going through the motions. The priest pronounced them man and wife. You may kiss the bride. Luca leaned in, and for one heart-stopping moment, Adriana thought about pulling away. About making a scene. About showing everyone in this cathedral exactly what this marriage really was. But no. That wasn't the game she was playing. So when his lips met hers, she kissed him back. Not passionately, that would be giving too much. But not coldly either. She kissed him with just enough heat to make it interesting, just enough response to plant a question in his mind. What else doesn't he know about me? When they pulled apart, she saw it again. That flicker of something in his eyes. Surprise. Curiosity. The first crack in his certainty. The reception was held at the Desai estate, a mansion on Lake Michigan that looked like it belonged to European royalty rather than American criminals. Crystal chandeliers, marble everything, a ballroom that could hold 500 people comfortably. Adriana played her part perfectly. She smiled for the photographs. She danced with her father, with Luca's father, with various men whose names she'd memorized along with their body counts. She accepted congratulations and well wishes from women wearing dresses that cost more than her first car. But every moment, she was watching. Learning. Taking notes on the power dynamics, the alliances, the fault lines in this world she'd just officially entered. And every time she caught Luca watching her, which was often, she made sure he saw something different than what he expected. Intelligence instead of docility. Strength instead of submission. A woman who was very much paying attention. The first test came during the toasts. Marco Vitali stood up, glass in hand, that ugly smirk on his face. "To the happy couple," he said, his voice dripping with irony that only Adriana seemed to catch. "May their union be as profitable as we all hope." Laughter rippled through the crowd. They thought it was a joke about legitimate business. They didn't know the truth, that this marriage literally was a business transaction, that territories had already changed hands, that Adriana's worth had been calculated down to the dollar. But Adriana stood up. Every eye turned to her. This wasn't part of the script. Brides didn't give toasts at their own weddings. Not in their world. They sat quietly, smiled prettily, and let the men do the talking. "Thank you, Marco," she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "Profitable indeed. Though I think my husband will find that I bring far more to this union than mere business arrangements." She turned to look at Luca, who was watching her with an expression somewhere between surprise and warning. "I bring loyalty. Intelligence. The ability to see what others miss." She paused, let that sink in. "My father taught me that in our world, the most dangerous people aren't the ones who shout the loudest. They're the ones who watch. Who listen. Who learn." She raised her glass. "To marriage. To partnership. To never underestimating what someone is capable of." The crowd cheered, completely missing the layers of meaning in her words. But Luca didn't miss them. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers gripped his glass just a fraction harder. "Good," she thought again. "Now he's listening." The Desai mansion had a separate wing for the master suite. Enormous rooms, each more lavish than the last, all prepared for the new Mrs. Desai. Adriana's belongings had been moved in that morning, her clothes, her books, her few personal items from the Moretti estate. She stood in the bedroom, still in her wedding dress, when Luca finally entered. He'd removed his jacket and tie, rolled up his sleeves. He looked tired, she realized. And maybe, just maybe, uncertain. "We need to talk," he said. "Do we?" Adriana turned to face him fully. "I thought this was just business." "What's there to talk about?" His eyes narrowed. "You heard. Every word." She didn't blink, didn't flinch. "The walls in St. Cecilia's are thinner than you'd think." For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Adriana could see him recalculating, reassessing. She'd gone off script. The docile wife he'd expected had been replaced by this. A woman who'd heard the worst and hadn't run. A woman who'd walked down the aisle anyway and was now standing in his bedroom looking at him like an equal rather than a possession. "I won't apologize," he said finally. "I told the truth. This is a business arrangement." "I know." Adriana started unbuttoning the back of her dress, her fingers steady. "And now that we both know where we stand, we can proceed accordingly." "What does that mean?" She slipped out of the dress, standing in just her silk slip, and hung it carefully in the closet. When she turned back, Luca was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "It means," she said calmly, "that you bought my family's territories and alliances. You got the shipping routes and the docks. You got a well-trained wife from good stock who'll give you heirs and keep her mouth shut." She walked toward him, and to her satisfaction, he actually took a step back. But you didn't buy my spirit, Luca. You didn't buy my mind. And you certainly didn't buy my cooperation beyond the bare minimum our contract requires. She stopped in front of him, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. So here's how this is going to work. Is that so? His voice was dangerous, but she didn't care. I'll be the perfect wife in public. I'll smile for your business partners. I'll host your dinners. I'll give you the legitimate heirs you want. But in private? You'll earn every moment of warmth from me. Every smile, every kind word, every ounce of affection. You want a transaction? Fine. But in this transaction, I'm not just merchandise. I'm a partner. And partners get respect. Luca stared at her for a long moment. Then, to her utter shock, he laughed. Actually laughed, a real sound of genuine amusement. You've got fire, he said. I'll give you that. You have no idea what I've got, Adriana replied. But you're going to find out. Let me tell you where we've been. Adriana Moretti married a man who saw her as a signing bonus. She heard him say he didn't want her, never did. And instead of running, instead of breaking, she walked down that aisle and declared war. Not with violence. Not with drama. But with something far more dangerous, her refusal to be invisible. Now, here's what you need to understand about this story. This isn't about a woman winning a man's love through patience and suffering. This isn't about changing yourself to be worthy of someone who doesn't value you. This is about something far more powerful: what happens when two people who think they understand the game realize they've been playing it all wrong. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this ending is going to stay with you. Trust me. The first month, the Cold War. The first month of the Desai marriage was like a chess game played in whispers and weighted silences. Luca kept his distance, treating Adriana exactly as he'd promised, with cold courtesy. He gave her access to his accounts for household expenses. He didn't interfere with how she decorated their shared spaces. He was never cruel, never raised his voice, never laid a hand on her in anger. He also never spoke to her unless necessary. They had separate bedrooms. They took meals together in silence, the only sound the clink of silverware against china. When his business associates came to dinner, Adriana played her part perfectly, the gracious hostess, beautiful and quiet, pouring wine and smiling at the right moments. But in private, she was building something. She'd discovered that the Desai mansion had a library, 3 floors of books that no one had touched in years. Luca's mother's collection, she learned from one of the older staff. The late Mrs. Desai had been a voracious reader before she died. Adriana made it her domain. She read everything: history, philosophy, business strategy. But more importantly, she listened. The staff talked to her in ways they never talked to Luca. They told her things. About the organization, about the rival families, about weaknesses in the Desai empire that Luca was too proud or too busy to see. She started making notes. Suggestions. Solutions to problems she wasn't supposed to know existed. And then, one night in week 5, she left them on his desk. The next morning, Luca stormed into the breakfast room. What is this? He threw down the papers she'd left. Adriana sipped her coffee, not looking up from her book. What does it look like? It looks like you've been spying on my business. I've been listening. There's a difference. She finally met his eyes. Your shipping operation in Milwaukee has a leak. Someone's skimming off the top. I know who. I know how. And I know how to fix it without starting a war with the other families. Luca's jaw clenched. That's not your concern. You're right. It's not. But you married me for my connections, didn't you? For the Moretti name and all that comes with it? Well, I still have contacts in Milwaukee. People who trust me. People who would never talk to you because you're. She paused. You're scary, Luca. You rule through fear. That works sometimes. But sometimes you need someone who can walk through doors that are closed to you. She stood up, walked past him. Use the information or don't. It's worth about $3 million a year to you. I thought you might appreciate a return on your investment. She left him standing there, staring at those papers. 3 days later, the leak was fixed. Exactly as she'd suggested. Luca never said thank you. But that night, he knocked on her bedroom door and asked if she'd join him for dinner. Not the formal dining room. His private study. It was a small thing. But it was the first crack in the wall between them. The shift, seeing each other. It started slowly, like ice melting at the edges. Luca began asking her opinion on things. Small things at first, which wine to serve at a particular dinner, whether to accept an invitation from a rival family. Then bigger things. Business decisions. Territory negotiations. Adriana never pushed. She offered her thoughts when asked, then left him to decide. She never demanded credit, never made him feel diminished by her intelligence. And something strange started happening. Luca started talking to her. Real conversations. About his day, about the pressures of running an empire, about the weight of being his father's son. About how exhausting it was to always be the serpent, always be feared, always be alone even in a room full of people. Adriana listened. She didn't offer empty comfort. She didn't try to fix him. She just listened. And in return, she started talking too. About what it was like to be raised as a commodity. To know from age 7 that you'd be sold to the highest bidder. To watch your father count your value in ports and territories. To wonder if anyone would ever want you, not your name, not your connections, not your womb, but the person behind all of that. One night, 3 months into their marriage, Luca asked her a question. They were in his study, going over a contract. It was late, almost midnight. Rain hammered against the windows. Why did you walk down that aisle? He asked suddenly. After you heard. You could have run. Why didn't you? Adriana looked up from the papers. She'd known this question was coming eventually. Where would I have run to? She asked. I had no money of my own. No skills that translate to the real world. No protection. Your world, our world, doesn't let women like me just walk away. That's not the only reason. She smiled slightly. No. It's not. So what was it? Adriana set down her pen. Looked at him directly. Pride, she said. You said I'd learn to expect nothing. That I was just part of a package deal. And I decided that I'd rather walk into hell with my head up than run from it and prove you right. I decided that if you saw me as nothing, I'd make you see differently. Even if it took years. Even if it never worked. I wouldn't give you the satisfaction of breaking me. Something in Luca's expression shifted. Softened. You're nothing like I expected, he said quietly. Neither are you. And it was true. The cold, calculating man who'd called her a signing bonus had slowly revealed layers she hadn't expected. He was brilliant, far more intelligent than people gave him credit for. He was fair to his people, generous to those who served him loyally. He carried the weight of hundreds of families who depended on him for their livelihoods. He was also lonely. So desperately, achingly lonely that it sometimes broke her heart. I was wrong, Luca said suddenly. Adriana blinked. What? That day. At the church. I was wrong. He stood up, walked to the window, his back to her. I told Marco that love makes you weak. That my father destroyed himself over my mother. But I've been thinking about that. A lot. And I realized, my father didn't destroy himself because he loved my mother. He destroyed himself because he loved her badly. Possessively. He tried to control everything, protect everything, and in doing so, he made himself vulnerable to anyone who threatened her. He turned around. But you're not weak. You're the strongest person I've ever met. And somehow, over these past few months, you've made me better. Sharper. More complete. And that's not weakness. That's partnership, Adriana finished softly. Yes. The rain continued to fall. The clock on the mantel ticked. I don't expect you to forgive me, Luca said. For what I said. For how I treated you. For thinking you were a signing bonus? He flinched. Yes. Adriana stood up, walked over to where he stood by the window. I don't need an apology, Luca. I need to know, if we're going to do this, really do this, I need to know you see me. Not the Moretti name. Not the alliance. Not the future heirs. Me. Adriana. The woman who reads too much and asks too many questions and will never, ever be the docile wife you thought you wanted. Luca reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. It was the first truly tender gesture he'd ever made. I see you, he said. I'm terrified of how much I see you. Why terrified? Because you were right. I didn't want this. I didn't want to need anyone. And now He paused, now I can't imagine this empire without you in it. And that's the most dangerous thing that's ever happened to me. Adriana felt something crack open in her chest. Not love, not yet. But the possibility of it. The beginning. Then I guess we're both terrified, she whispered. Yeah. I married a man who didn't want me. And somewhere along the way, I started wanting him back. Started seeing past the serpent to the person underneath. Started thinking that maybe, just maybe, this business transaction could become something real. Luca's hand cupped her face. Can I kiss you? Not as your husband. Not as part of any transaction. But as someone who's asking permission? Adriana smiled. Really smiled. For the first time since that awful day in the cathedral hallway. Yes. When he kissed her this time, it wasn't for show. It wasn't for the cameras or the guests or the business arrangement. It was real. And it was the beginning of everything. 6 months later, the transformation. The change in the Desai household was subtle but undeniable. Luca and Adriana became a true partnership. In business, she was his secret weapon, the one who could navigate social situations he couldn't, who could read people in ways his blunt force approach never could. Together, they expanded the empire in ways neither could have done alone. But more than that, they became friends. Then lovers. Then something that looked remarkably like what Adriana had once dreamed of in her most foolish moments, a marriage based on respect, trust, and genuine affection. Luca never said, I love you easily. That wasn't who he was. But he showed it in 1,000 small ways. The books that appeared on her nightstand, always something he thought she'd find interesting. The way he asked her opinion on everything, truly valued her input. The way he looked at her across a room full of people like she was the only person there. And Adriana? She'd won something far more valuable than his love. She'd won herself back. The girl who'd stood in that hallway, trembling and broken, had become a woman who knew her worth. Who demanded respect and got it. Who'd learned that sometimes the biggest victory isn't changing someone else, it's refusing to let them change you. The final scene. 1 year after that awful wedding day, Adriana found Luca in his study late at night. He was looking at something on his desk, old photographs. What are those? She asked. Pictures from the wedding. He looked up at her. I was remembering. Remembering what? How wrong I was. How close I came to. He shook his head. If you'd run that day, Adriana. If you'd walked away. I would have lost the best thing that ever happened to me before I even knew what I was losing. Adriana sat down next to him. Picked up one of the photos. It showed her walking down the aisle, her face a mask of composure, her eyes absolutely haunted. She looks terrified, Adriana said softly, looking at her younger self. She looks brave, Luca corrected. Braver than anyone I've ever known. He pulled out a small box. Opened it. Inside was a ring. Not the massive diamond he'd given her as an engagement ring, that cold, transactional piece of jewelry that had always felt like a shackle. This was different. A sapphire, deep blue, surrounded by diamonds. Simple but stunning. What's this? I want to marry you again, Luca said. Not a business transaction this time. Not a merger. Just, us. I want to stand in front of people and promise you things I actually mean. Love. Partnership. Forever. Tears pricked at Adriana's eyes. You're asking me to marry you? Again? I'm asking you to let me do it right this time. Let me give you the wedding you deserved. The marriage you deserved. Let me prove that I'm not the man I was in that room at St. Cecilia's. Adriana looked at the ring. Then at him. On one condition, she said. Anything. Marco doesn't get to give a toast. Luca laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed his whole face. Deal. He slipped the ring on her finger. And this time, when he said, I want you. I always will, Adriana believed him. Because he'd earned it. And she'd earned the right to believe. Epilogue. They did remarry, 6 months later. A small ceremony. Just close friends and family who actually mattered. And when Adriana walked down the aisle for the second time, there was no fear in her eyes. No mask of composure hiding her terror. Just joy. Because this time, she was walking toward a man who saw her. Really saw her. And chose her anyway. Not because of her name. Not because of what she could give him. But because of who she was. And that made all the difference. Closing call to action. Warm, reflective tone. So that's Adriana's story. A woman who heard the worst truth on her wedding day and chose to walk forward anyway. Who refused to be broken. Who demanded to be seen. If this story touched your heart, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this, stories about strength and resilience and finding love in the most unexpected places, these are the stories that matter. These are the stories that remind us what we're capable of when we refuse to accept less than we deserve. Comment below and tell me, what's the biggest lesson you're taking from Adriana's journey? And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's fighting their own battle to be seen, to be valued, to be respected. The life lesson. The heart of the story. This story teaches us that your worth is not determined by how others value you, it's determined by how you value yourself. Adriana could have let Luca's words define her. She could have become the invisible, docile wife he expected. Or she could have run away, let his rejection break her spirit. Instead, she did something far more powerful, she stayed, but she stayed on her terms. She taught us that strength isn't always in walking away, sometimes it's in standing your ground and demanding respect. You can't make someone love you, but you can refuse to settle for less than you deserve. True partnership is earned, not demanded. It comes from mutual respect, not contracts and transactions. The person who doesn't value you at the start might not deserve a place at your end, but sometimes, people can grow and change when challenged by someone who refuses to be diminished. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. But perhaps most importantly, never let anyone's low expectations of you become your ceiling. Use them as your floor, and build yourself up from there. Adriana walked into a marriage as a transaction and transformed it into a partnership. Not by changing who she was, but by refusing to be anything less than her full self. By demanding to be seen, heard, valued. And in doing so, she didn't just change Luca's perception of her. She changed her perception of herself. That's the real victory. Remember, you are not a signing bonus. You are not a transaction. You are not a package deal. You are the whole damn package. And anyone lucky enough to be in your life should know it. Subscribe. Like. Share. And never forget your worth. Until next time, keep fighting for the love and respect you deserve.